Hello guys, once again welcome back to another Android app development tutorial. In this class, I am going to teach you how to place a preference headers in your app settings page. So in some situation, you want to create a layout similar to this one. So here the first page displays some preference headers and second page will display corresponding settings. So here the preference headers are created using preferences activity. So one of the main advantage of using preference activity is that if it is a large screen, the preference activity will display the preference headers and corresponding settings on the same page. And if it is a normal device, the preference activity will display preference heading and corresponding settings page in separate pages. So that is the advantage of using preference activity. So if you're using preference headers, each of these settings page is an instance of preference fragment. So we have to use separate preference XML file for each of the settings, and this settings page is an instance of preference fragment. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to implement this type of settings page in your Android application. So here I already create an Android Studio project. Now we are going to place a settings page into this Android Studio project. So now there is only one activity, and on the toolbar we have some options menu. We have a settings option available. So now we need to create a settings page for this application. So first thing, I'm going to add a class for the preference activity. So we are going to use preference activity for display the header files, preference headers. So first I'm going to create a class for preference activity. I name it as settings activity, and this class extends preference activity. Okay, so we are going to display two settings page, and we are going to display two preference headers. So each settings page is an instance of preference fragment. So we have to create another class for preference fragment. So I'm going to create another class. I name it as settings fragment, and this class extends preference fragment. Okay, so now we can design our settings page. First I need some string resources. Open strings.xml. So now I'm going to add some string resources for design the settings pages. So here I place some string resources for design settings page. Okay, so first we can design our preference header. So for that, create a new Android resource file. I name it as header preference, and change the resource type into XML. So here the root element, you have to change the root element into preference headers. So now here I am going to place two preference headers. So here I place two preference headers. First one is a general settings, and second heading is about app. So I already told you, if you're using preference headers, each settings page is an instance of a preference fragment. So here we already create a class called settings fragment that is extends preference fragment. So here we are going to use the same fragment for these two settings page. So you have to specify your fragment class name by using this attribute called Android fragment. So here we use the same fragment for these two settings, and here we have another two attribute called title and summary. So now I'm going to create two separate settings pages, settings preference files. So now we can close this one. So now I'm going to create a separate preference settings page. I name it as general settings preference. Okay, change the resource type into XML. So here it is the root element is the preference screen. Okay, now I'm going to add some preferences into this page. So here I place some preferences settings with some preference category. We have two checkbox preference and we have some list preference, etc. So this is the general settings for the application. So now I'm going to create another preference settings page for the about app header, because our header file contains two preference headers. So this is the first header is for the general settings, and second header for the about app settings. So now I'm going to create another preference settings page for the about app section. So create another Android resource file. I name it as about app settings preference. Change the root element resource type into XML. Here also it is the preference screen. Here also I am going to add some preferences. So in the about app page, here I place two preference. First one represents the app version, and second one represents the privacy policy of the application. Okay, so now in this application we have a preference header and we have two preference settings page. Okay, so now go to the preference header. So here we are going to use a same fragment for these two preference pages. So when user select any one of these heading, we have to inform the fragment which item is selected by the user. For that, here we have to add some extra field. So here I'm going to pass some parameters to the fragment. So you can use the extra attribute. So the name indicate the key for the value. So here I specify the key as settings. Now specify value as general. Okay. Now we can use the same thing for the second header also. Here also I use the same key and specify the value into about. Okay. So now we can configure the preference fragment. So open settings fragment. So in this class you have to override one method called onCreate. First we have to get the parameter. Get arguments, get string. Okay, now we can check it out. So if settings dot equals general, that means user select the first heading, otherwise I'll say settings dot equal about, that means user select the second heading. So in the first case we can display the general settings page. So you can call the method called add preference from resource. Specify the XML resource file .xml. Here it is, general settings preference. In the second case, display the second settings page. So add preference resource .xml. It is about app settings preference. Okay. So now the preference fragment is ready. Now we can display the preference header inside our activity. So open settings activity. So here there is you have to override only one method called on build header. This one. on build headers. This is the only one method you must implement. So from this method, you have to call the method called load headers from resources. First parameter is the resource ID. Here it is header preference. Second parameter is a list. Here is the parameter. So pass the parameter target. Okay. So now we can display the settings activity when user select the settings option from the options menu. So go to main activity. So here override the method called on options item selected. So here we can use a switch case statement to identify which item is selected by the user. Case id action settings. In that case, we can start the settings activity. So start activity, new intent, this settings activity dot plus, and here return true. Okay, also handle the default situation. In that situation, we can implement the super class implementation of this method. Okay, that's it. Okay, now we can test our project. So I run the project. Okay, now the project available on this virtual device. So I open the settings page. Yeah, there is some error. So here we have some error. So the error due to we didn't specify the newly created activity in our Android manifest file. That is the problem. So specify the activity, the settings activity. Okay, so we can test it again. Okay, now open the settings page. So this is the settings page that contains two header preferences, general and about tab. So I open the first preference. Here also we got some error. So here the problem is the preference activity must override is validate fragment. So we have to override this method inside our preference activity. So this is our preference activity. So in this activity we have to override a method called is validate fragment. So here first specify your settings fragment class name. So settings fragment dot class dot get name dot equals fragment name. Okay, that's it. So now we can test it again. So I run the project again. Okay, now open the settings page. So now I'm going to click the first header. So this is the general settings page. Now click the second one. So this is the about app settings page. So this is how we place a preference headers in our app settings page. I hope you understand the concept. For getting more Android tutorial updates, please subscribe this channel now. Thank you for watching. See you in the next episode.